Hey everyone, Kumar Data Train here with Agile Meridian, and with me today is one of our partners, Chris Daly, we're going to be talking about the second principle in the Scaled Agile framework, and that principle is applying systems thinking. And so we're going to talk about the principle, how what it means to apply systems thinking from a Scaled Agile perspective, and maybe a little bit beyond that, how to apply systems thinking from just any perspective. What does that mean, and how as an individual on a team, as a manager, as a leader, what does it mean to apply systems thinking? So we'll get started. Chris, you want to maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts. By the way, we're both SPCs, and all that means is that we know a little bit about SAFe. And apply it with our clients. SAFe is a collection of patterns and practices that have been around for a long time, and SAFe has done a good job of putting these together into a framework. So with that, Chris, maybe what comes to mind when you think about applying systems thinking?
Well, I've spent a lot of time working in large organizations, right? And when you get in those large organizations, you can't help but develop feature teams, right? You develop a team that is responsible for one piece, and you can't look at the whole value stream, right? One team can't do everything. And so when we talk about system thinking, you'll see where in a large organization, teams will go off and they'll do their own thing, right? They'll go off and they'll do their own thing, and a piece might move, a date might slip, or maybe we take a different approach, and we don't think about the ramifications on downstream, right? We don't think about the other teams that have got to do the work that they take it, and they've got to adapt the way they're doing their stuff because somebody made a decision a while back. And that's really the fundamental reason, in my opinion, why SAFe exists. Right? Because when we talk about Agile, teams are really good at making cross-functional teams, taking them and letting them do their work. But when we start getting into the larger organizations where you're talking about a lot of teams in a particular value stream, we don't do a good job of communicating. And it's really a challenge then to ask those folks to start thinking from a system standpoint, right? To start thinking about the entirety or the whole.
Yeah, one of the things about this principle from SAFe is one of the things they say is that the solution itself is a system, meaning that if you're building something new, whether there's software components to it and there are people components to it, there may be operational components to it, there may be whatever it is, the entirety of it is a system. And so to your point, if you have a team that's working on part of it and they don't understand the whole solution or the whole system, they're going to be maybe sub-optimizing for what they're creating. And so it's important that as leaders, as product managers and people that are sort of defining what needs to get built, right, prioritizing what's most important, it's important that they imbue the teams with a notion of the solution as a system, so they start thinking beyond their team and the things that they're building, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to your point, teams, they just don't have that visibility. And so what do you say, to people that are, whether you're implementing the Scale Agile framework or not, what would you say are some things to do for people to help their teams understand the system better?
One of the things that I wasn't a fan of originally, and a lot of folks push back on, is this idea of the PI planning, right? Or the big room planning if you're not implementing SAFe, where you bring the folks together and you talk about, okay, what's your schedule? What are your dependencies, right? What are your risks? What's the sequencing of the items, right? And then we start to understand how we interact with everyone else. There's the infamous spaghetti diagram where you've got all the features, and you've got the red lines or the red pieces of yarn if you're in a physical environment. where you're connecting all those features, right? And to some people, it looks over complicated. And do we really need to do that? But yet, what I've found is that really is an excellent discovery opportunity for folks to get together and collaborate and talk. And then once you do that, once you understand what those dependencies are and what the sequencing is, then maintaining it as you go forward, and not just make it a one-time event, right? Make it part of what you do on a regular basis. Is we're going to manage those dependencies, manage those risks, and talk to each other, right? It's really about communication with each other. That's really what anything we're doing, whether we're talking about safe or we're talking about agile, that's really what the problem we're trying to solve. We had these problems before, right? I know we don't want to go back too far, but from a waterfall standpoint, when we were doing traditional project management, traditional development, we had the same problem, right?
Yeah.
We had component teams, they develop their piece, they do their bit, they wouldn't collaborate, they wouldn't talk about it, and inevitably somebody would make a decision somewhere early in the process that didn't get communicated down, and it would cause problems, right? And they're thinking about optimizing themselves, not thinking about optimizing the whole.
Right, because it's not part of their duty, I guess. They're being asked to do a particular thing, and that's what they do. They're develop these features, develop these stories, and we'll integrate them later on. So it's not their fault. It's putting the conditions in place so that people will start to interconnect with other people that are building different parts of the system. And to your point, PI planning, program increment planning, or big room planning, if you're not doing the Scaled Agile framework, is a way to get all the people together and plan together. And by doing so, it can be extremely valuable. One example I can think of during a PI planning event was when the VP of a company we were consulting with was sitting talking to a tester who ordinarily a VP and a tester would never have that conversation, right? Because they work in different areas of the system.
Right.
But because it is a system, this event brought these two people together, and the tester mentioned something about an issue that the VP was unaware of. And it turned out this issue was costing the company hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in lost revenue. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year because of this one conversation was saved between a VP and a tester, right? And so you think about the system can be an incredibly powerful thing if utilized, right? So the solution being the system, and making sure that interconnections between people in the system are made and cultivated, right? And I think it's a really powerful thing.
The other thing about, as you were talking, I was just thinking about how many, if you think about companies, how many of us have actually sat down and looked at a value stream, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people work in an organization where they've never actually seen all the steps that go into their product, right? And that's another great thing that comes out of embracing that second principle, right? Is that value stream gets documented and talked about. And suddenly we start talking about things like, we got an approval. I know one of the organizations I work with has a design approval process that they have to go through. And yet they go through that approval, and the person that's approving it is not in the meetings, doesn't understand the requirements. It's a holdup on the system, right? And then that same person has to approve the final product. Again, they've not been engaged all the way through. Well, when you lay it all out and you look at it, as a value stream, you suddenly start realizing this person ends up being a bottleneck. And, and the VPs, to your point, the executives don't have an opportunity to see the entire value stream. They just kind of know, work gets done and here's what comes out. And we don't really see that step.
Right.
So it's really important to be able to do that, right? To be able to see that value stream.
Yeah, value stream mapping is an extremely important part of applying systems thinking in the Scaled Agile world. And value stream mapping isn't something that's unique to SAFe. It's been around forever, right? In lean implementations and lean and agile implementations, value stream mapping is one of the first things you do when you are looking to understand the system. Is the first thing you do is understand the value stream. And the value stream is really a visualization of all the steps that your consumers will take to derive some value from the products and services that you provide. So what are all those steps? And through each of those steps, you're making services available to that customer. And when you visualize it like this, you can start to visualize the people that are involved. This is after all, it's all about people, the people and the interactions between people, between customers and between the people in your organization. And so visualizing the value stream allows you to see the system as a whole, and allows you to also see the bottlenecks in the system, to your point, Chris, to see where is the process bottlenecking, where the customer is inconvenienced because they can't get something, or the people serving the customers are inconvenienced because they have to make extra stops to get data or information to serve the customer. And so value stream mapping is really important, and understanding and optimizing the full value stream, the delivery value stream is what SAFe calls it, is very important from a systems thinking perspective, because it allows the people on these teams to understand where they fit in the system and who their downstream teams are that they need information from, and upstream teams are that they feed information to. And then if you go macro out again, one of the SAFe, we're talking about value streams here, which is one of the parts of applying systems thinking. The other is the enterprise itself, right, is a system. Right. And what are your thoughts around that? Enterprise being a system?
People don't think about it that way, right? They don't think about the enterprise as being a system, and don't. So hence they kind of look at it, as though it's one little piece. And in reality, to your point, it is part of the system, right? It's not just, when you go through the SAFe literature and you look, for example, even the Scrum Guide itself, right, it's focused on developers, but yet there's a lot of other people that are engaged in the enterprise in that system. Right. Mm-hmm. Legal's got to be in there. If you're, I've been doing a lot of work lately with marketing groups, to develop how they're going to respond to omni-channel or how the omni-channel is going to work, right? What are the various touch points and how they're going to interact with their customers. And, content. Who would have thought? I never would have thought until I worked with them about content and the development of content being a part of that system. And then you add in the fact that if it's a pharmaceutical, well, you got legal that's got to be engaged. Right. You've got doctors, and it just the whole organization contributes to what comes out the back end. And in this case, it's the marketing materials, right? It's the educational materials, and it's just so important that you consider that, because I go back to one of my early things that happened to me was we were developing a system, and we built it in such a way. It was a web-based system. We were replacing, the old client server technology system, right? And we built a web page that took about a second and a half to render. And it wasn't a big deal, right? It was like, okay, it's a second and a half. It's not a big deal. That's pretty fast. Well, except for that web page was for a data entry function, right? A true data entry function. And so they never looked at the screen, right? They didn't look at the page. They had keyboards and they were looking at documents, and their fingers were just flying. I was looking at it from the standpoint of this one screen. We converted it from client server into a web-based system, right? I wasn't looking at the whole to say, well, what was the impact of that, right?
Right.
In the whole scheme of things, it impacted the whole thing. And that's, it's one of those things that until you get bit by that, you don't really think about it, right? You really don't contemplate it. And, as software folks, we don't think about all the other parts that are involved, right? You ask a developer, are you done yet? Yeah, I'm done, right? They haven't tested, hasn't been through user acceptance testing and all the other things. We only think about our one little bit. We don't think about the entire enterprise and the organization. And we don't think about third parties too, right? There's third parties. You and I talked about this before we got on, about the third parties being engaged and how they fit in that value stream. Especially with the prevalence of outsourcing.
Right. And I think that's taking it even broader. So the organization as a system, the enterprise as a system. So you've got value streams that the enterprise supports, right? Or that's part of their business, right? The business model is based on the value that they provide their customers. And within those value streams, you have a bunch of delivery streams where people are delivering value to their customers, and it all sort of works together to create value for the company and for their clients, for their customers. Right. Then you're talking even broader than that. It's about the ecosystem around the company, around the organizations, like the suppliers, the customers, the competitors, the whole landscape outside of the organization that influences the systems that the organization decides to invest in, whether they're new value streams, or maintaining, enhancing existing value streams. And when I say new value streams, I mean like new market niches. Man, an organization might decide, oh, we need to go after this niche in the market because we see an opportunity, and so they create a new value stream, a new sort of way to make revenue, generate revenue, that employs a whole bunch of people. And of course, as long as those people understand the full system, it's all great, right? But you're talking more ecosystem thinking, right? Which is a little bit beyond what SAFe talks about when they talk about applying systems thinking. But it's a valid point that leaders and managers need to think about more than when they're applying systems thinking. They need to think about the enterprise and what soup the enterprise lives in. Outside of it.
You mentioned that the third parties. One of the things that I've been encouraging my teams that I'm coaching and organizations that I'm coaching is to bring those third parties in to, if you're doing a PI planning, or bring them in and treat them, instead of treating them like they're a black box on the outside, bring them in and include them in part, as part of your PI planning or your big room planning, right? To facilitate, treat them as though they're just another division or another team in the organization. Because I've seen cases where we've had a system developed by one organization, one external party, and then we contracted with another party to actually implement it. Mm-hmm. Right? You talk about a nightmare of, two different companies, one building and one deploying.
Yeah.
They all have their own ways of doing stuff, and man, it's a mess. And so you've got to bring those people in.
Yeah. I totally agree. And unfortunately, that's, I see that a lot, even with companies that are using the Scaled Agile framework or any framework to, Agile framework to develop their products and services. And it's a lack of systems thinking in that case, right? So whether you're using SAFe or not, systems thinking it's not a new thing. It's not a new concept. It's not a SAFe concept. It's just a good thing to train yourself as a leader, as a manager, as a product manager, to think in those terms. Actually, you and I were, you were hosting a Management 3.0 Summit the other day on complexity thinking. A little plug for you, Chris.
Thanks for that.
And Management 3.0. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when we're talking about system thinking, right, and we end up with problems, the problems we end up with are complex. So how do we go about solving those problems, right? And one of the ways we do that is we specifically, most of us go in and we say, all right, we're going to reduce it. We're going to break it down into small pieces that we can understand. And each one of those pieces has complexity. And so when we think about complexity thinking, one of the tenets that's there that I really embrace is this idea that you solve complexity with complexity, meaning we engage humans to think about how they're going to do it, right? We acknowledge the fact that what we're doing is complex and it's hard and that we might not get it right the first time, right? So we're going to put it out there. We're going to be agile. We're going to iterate through it and we're going to adapt and change how we do things, right? And it's important that you consider that. What we're trying to solve is these complex issues in organizations. If these were simple, they wouldn't need all of us to come in and do that, right? If they knew the rule, if they knew everybody agreed on the requirements and everybody agreed on the technology, and it was one team could do it. We don't need all this, but we start looking at the organization. You do, because it's so complex.
Yeah, I like that, applying complexity to solve for complex problems, and nothing more complex than people, right?
Yeah.
We're pretty complex beings, and so having people solve these problems together is a good thing.
Yep. One more thing about just complexity, real quick, is when you think about an enterprise, think about all the different people that are interacting, right? And so when we talk about a system, right, a simple system is 2 or 3 people, a team, right, 5 or 6. But imagine having 150 people engaged in this planning for this product, right, or for this value stream. How complex is that? How many different opinions are there?
Yeah.
Right? How many wallflowers don't have an opinion and don't say a word, right? And so we think about when I think about complexity, I think about not only the system itself, but the people that make up that system.
Absolutely, and I think that the one of the benefits and maybe pitfalls at the same time of SAFE is that it provides a structure for teams to collaborate and share information, share knowledge, and understand the system better. But it also it may not do enough to encourage people to take that initiative.
Right.
And so much of it is really on leadership, and leaders, I believe, and I think SAFE is of the same mind. Leadership exists at all levels, and it's about creating psychologically safe environments for people to understand, where their team ends and where other teams begin, and understand how to make those connections with other people and get the information that they need. Right. This quote by Edwards Demming is really a good one. Everyone's already doing their best. Well, it's true. People are working hard. May not be working very smart, but they're working hard. The problems are not with them. It's really with the system, and that's where leadership and management can shine. Anything you want to talk about here, Chris, in terms of your experience with this?
It's really interesting when this quote, right, from the standpoint that most leaders think that it's just the people that need to change, right? And it's not the culture, it's not the process, it's just we need to get better people, and that doesn't work, right? We want to have and create an environment where we're collaborating and working together and thinking about the whole and not just the individuals. And if as a leader, if you want to make a change and you want things to come out differently, you've got to go in and change the way you do your system, or the way your system's working.
Right, and empower the people to make the decisions. Right, you push decision making down to the people that are closest to the work. And while SAFE provides a framework to do that, it's still up to the people to make it happen. And so these principles, the SAFE principles, are very sound. They're based on decades of patterns that have been proven to work, right? So the challenge then is for leaders, whoever might be watching this, is not just to sort of go hire a bunch of us to come in install the system, because it's not going to work by itself. It's going to take you and people like you, leaders like you, to understand the system, your system, the teams, the people, the interactions in your company, and apply systems thinking, apply ecosystems thinking to empower your people to make decisions and shorten the cycle of decision making, so that the decision making isn't just with a few people. It is distributed to the people that are closest to the work.
Yeah.
Anything you want to? Go ahead.
With this quote, I think if we updated this quote to say everyone is already doing their best, the problems are with the culture or the enterprise. Only management can change the culture or the enterprise. I think this quote would resonate more and be more telling about how it applies, right? Because when you think of system and we say system to people, they think of the software, right?
You're right.
And really what we're talking about is culture. We're talking about, going back to your one of your favorite topics, right, of psychological safety, and making sure that that's there. And that is really one of the keys to making this work, right? To making safe work.
Yeah. Well, yeah, making any framework like that work, right? And SAFE is a scaling framework, so it allows you to scale your Agile implementation from one team to many teams, and still function with all the teams aligned to a common goal and purpose.
Right.
And I would say that a really well run and executed SAFE implementation actually has the effect of descaling your operation, where the teams act as one. Decisions are made very quickly because they're all in communication with each other. They're aligned in their decision making. So even though you may have many teams working on one thing, they operate as if they're one small team, because you have in effect descaled how they work together. And so that's my personal opinion. It's not a safe position. But what do you think about that?
I would agree. I think that is, I encourage teams to start out with Agile first and then go do the SAFE, right? Adopt it. But SAFE is really there. It's really a pattern that you can use to really scale the organization. I do have to admit, as you were talking, you and I haven't talked about how it might descale. I think that would be an interesting thing to talk about at some point, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, we're sitting here at what, 28 minutes on this, and you and I could talk about this for another hour easy. So
yeah, we could easily.
I still think that's an interesting point.
Well, maybe we'll queue that up in a future session, and maybe something unrelated in our Agile Shorts series. We can talk about descaling.
Yeah,
not that it would be counter to what SAFE is talking. Again, like I said, with a good implementation of SAFE, you end up in the same place where decision making is pushed pushed to the people that are closest to the decision, and leadership is supporting and creating a culture of shared responsibility. People understand the system that they're in, and they know who to talk to. You're basically breaking down the silos between the divisions in a department. Not that they don't exist, but you're making learning flow through the organization by applying systems thinking. And so it's a really far-reaching principle, has a lot of impact. And in my, I don't know about you, but in my experience, it's poorly understood. It may be understood, but poorly applied, I'd say, in most organizations we work with. But to me, this is one of the most important principles to understand and apply.
Yeah, I agree.
Any parting thoughts, Chris?
No, I could offer more thought, but we just go longer. So no, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time for Principle 3. And if you don't know what it is, then look it up, and that way you'll come to our next session. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.